Brian Gillespie, formerly at TU Dublin.
Thanks very much. Nice to see Ronan. Sorry he can't be here today. He's a good lad. I hope he's still with us. Anyway, I'm delighted to be here today in one of my rare public appearances since I've retired from TU Dublin. This time yesterday, I looked more like Jerry the Monk Hutch, but when the day left prison, but I've spruced up for the day for this occasion. Now, if you were to read or write a history of LIR, never judge a book by its cover. You certainly wouldn't end up getting a sort of a steamy pot boiler that you would pick up on the airport on their way to a foreign holiday or would see it stacked high. What you would get is a good solid tale, a textbook like a Harvard business case study of how to run a committee, of success and cooperation between the various libraries and the various people and the individuals that were in the committee. And these were people that were dedicated to their task. I'm sorry to say, you'd read this book, you wouldn't find any infighting, you wouldn't find any hidden agendas, you wouldn't find people jockeying for position, all those things that you find in your day-to-day job, your day-to-day 9-to-5 job. Everybody was equal and everybody shared ideas, and I think that's probably still the same and sort of was quite generous in that. And things got done, and they still do. I was nominated as the first rep from what was then DIT in 2001, and in 2005 became the chair for 2 years. The first chair, and I was quite pleased with this, who wasn't from one of the major universities, which were, UCD, Trinity, Galway, etc. I stayed on as a committee member for many years until 2008, and I left them only because I felt unselfishly that it was time for somebody else to have a chance at doing it. I would have been quite happy to stay on and work. Such was my enjoyment of the group and the satisfaction and reward that it gave me. I'm not going to go into the history of the group. It started in 1993. I would think by the mid-90s, the group had become slightly in the doldrum. Now, I think the main reason for this was that there was, at the time, this might be controversial, there were rather too many chiefs. And if I'm still allowed to use that expression, there was far too many chiefs and not enough Indians. And that's no disrespect to the people that were on it. I just think there was an awful lot of university librarians and they had an awful lot of other things to do. And it was actually better if you had people who were prepared to give their time more to it to sort of get things done. And the group really came into its heyday in the year 2000 under the dynamic leadership of Helen Fallon, who was based in Maynooth, and she's now retired. And she was a sensible, practical, very well respected woman. She knew how to get things done. She knew how to run a committee. She was great at project management. She had a level head, and she was great at corralling and organising the skills of the people in the committee. She was ably followed by Julie Allen, who was of DCU. She also has retired, and then by me. It was a great committee we all worked on. And the actual fact, I think the only person who still hasn't retired, is still working, who was on that committee was John Kremen, who some of you will know if you work in TCD. Now, as well as a rep from each of the individual libraries, there was always a rep from HEA, and there's also, I see now, a rep from EduCampus, which we didn't have. But there was also in those days a rep from the Connell board, who in the time that I was there was Beatrice Dornan. Now, I don't know if anybody here is from RCSI. Beatrice is now retired, but Beatrice, if anybody remembers, was real library royalty. She was terribly patrician. She was impeccably neat, never a blade of hair out of place, never an excess word said at a meeting, and never a raised eyebrow, which didn't have the desired effect. And she was really, it was marvelous to have it. And there was a tradition in those days, still going, I hope, of the LIR committee going out for a Christmas lunch. Does that still happen? Yeah, good. I'm glad to hear. Out of our own pockets. No, I'll have you know, it was out of our own pockets. And we had the honour one year of having it in Beatrice's club on St. Stephen's Green, the Kildare Street and University Club. Now, I think Beatrice was a town member, and it's the sort of place where you walk in the hallway and there's trophy heads of wildebeest and the like that have obviously been shot by members in the club. The only TikTok you'll hear is of the grandfather clock in the foyer, and the main news feed is through the rustle of the paper copy of the Irish Times being read. And the lunch was a menu of game and rich sauces and richer puddings and oak sideboards groaning under the weight of decanters of tawny port. That was our reward for being for a year's work well done. I was followed as a committee member by Donna O'Dublin, who's I think now in Cork. She was then in Limerick, and then by Ronan. And it was during the time, it was just at the time of Ronan that I then left the committee. Now, Ronan made, and I'm going to cover some of the same points that he did. The main event of every year for LIR was organising the annual seminar. And I was trying to think about, because it remains now very popular and it's still very much, something that people come to. Now, of course, a lot of people are coming onto that. And what is the reason for that? Why is the LIR annual seminar so popular? And I would say it's a number of things to do with the programme. I think it was always trying to match a topic that was very much in the news or very much at the cutting edge, which could appeal to a broad audience. So you sort of had every level of library staff would be willing to attend. And in its heyday, we would have had 100+ members coming to it. And I think there's probably, with the people online, there's probably about that number here. It was also a sociable event. And here it is, it's happening again on a Friday. And it was often held on a Friday so that people who were attending could also especially if you come up by train, you could maybe make a day of it and you could stay overnight and you could do it. And it usually started so that there was time for people to come up from places like Cork and Galway and Limerick, Sligo, who could make it on the train without having to come up the night before. Of course, it was free, so it was that was always an attraction as well. And I think the speakers obviously made it a very attractive option for people. We always did, and we still did. You can just look at the tape. We were always able to attract big name speakers. Most of the Irish head librarians, the chief librarians, over the years have given a talk, or in some cases addressed the troops at a LIR seminar. And we were regularly able to attract major senior figures from the UK to speak, all keen to give generously of their time. And at the same time, on the same programme, we would have staff from our own institutes who would be talked about practical initiatives, things that were happening on the ground. We saw it today with the show and tell, things that everybody in the audience could relate to and say, yeah, that's good. That might be something I could try. We could try that as well. And it would allow people to discuss things and talk about them during the intervals, during lunch, etc., like that. So in those cases, less of the blue skies thinking and more of the roll up the sleeves and say, let's give that a go. Now, as I say, we did have a number of colourful speakers who came from the UK, addressed various conferences. I'm going to put nobody's name in. I presume this thing is being recorded, which may be unfortunate for me. That's why I won't give any names. But there was the chief. I'll have to remember, try to avoid sending him. There was the university librarian from a top UK university who gave us the memorable phrase that the paperless library is as likely as the paperless toilet. And he was also, I met one of his staff who said, oh, well, there's only one difference between God and our librarian. God is omnipresent and our librarian is everywhere, but in our library. So he was obviously charging around all over the country. We had a vice principal, a chief strategist. You might be able to work out who this is, but I'm not naming any names. But a vice principal, chief strategist in a global LibTech services organization, who we took out for dinner the night before the conference, which was a tradition that we did. And there's people I was with other people from the committee, and he didn't say a word or he was monosyllabic during the dinner. It was impossible to get, and we're still scarred by that, by trying to make conversation. And then at the end, him and his big salary wanted, I was going to say borrow, but he didn't. He wanted the money. He wanted money for a taxi to take him home. So no names in that one. And then, well, as I say, we had an idea of taking them out for dinner. There was one year in which a chap who was head of a UK university research centre didn't want to go out for dinner. He wanted to go out and drink Guinness. And we went to Donaghy and Nesbitt's and had a fine number of pints, but being the consummate professional he was, turned up the next morning perfectly okay, and just had a lovely night out in Dublin in Donaghy and Nesbitt's, and that's what he wanted to do. To finish, and this is good, this is finished, and it's just bringing up some of the points that Ronan had mentioned. He talked about the 2 years, the theme of the conference, and it really has sort of been ahead of the curve when it's come to themes and initiatives which we were discussing, and maybe often before they were mainstream. Like they were talking, one of Ronan's was talking about e-books. I'm just looking at some of these. This year I had to go. 2001, web-based information management. 2001, web-based information management. This is commonplace now, but then 2003, the hybrid library. It's like it really only came into the mainstream talking about it about 5-6 years ago. 2005, we were all digitally challenged. We were then, we still are, but we were dealing with these things head on. 2008, empowering our users, which I know is sort of like a raison d'etre debate, but sort of just thinking about how we do that. 2014, open challenges with open access and open source. Like nobody thinks about you. Almost your whole day is thinking about open access. And 2019, AI. That's 5 years ago. We had a conference, a LIR conference on AI. I do think that the best title was the one that you had last year, which was "Don't Get Caught with Your Servers Down." I thought that was a great, which was about libraries and cyber security. And so that becomes an issue, as we know, for everything. That's enough for me. I'm looking forward to hearing what Peter and David have to say. Thanks very much.